Hey everyone, Insanity here, and we finally wrap up the PS1 series of Twisted Metals with Small Brawl, so it's time for another thoughts video. All the playthroughs were done on easy difficulty, but I also threw in codes for 30 FPS as well as a HP reduction code for the bosses in order to improve the overall pacing of the tournament playthroughs. My preferred runtime for a Twisted Metal tournament playthrough is at most 20 to 30 minutes, with anything faster than that being a bonus, as I usually dread playthroughs that possibly fall past half an hour. Even for Twisted Metal games I like. Pretty much every playthrough I've uploaded for each vehicle never gone higher than 23 minutes in Small Brawl, which is perfect. Of all the PS1 Twisted Metals, playing Small Brawl was probably a revelation for me. There are a lot of people who are fond of Small Brawl from what I've seen online before I ever played the game myself. In terms of historical order, Small Brawl was something I would play after having played every other Twisted Metal game, including Head On, but before 2012. My first exposure to the game was, I believe, watching some videos of it on GameSpot or IGN, plus the ever-helpful game packs. I once asked a friend if I could borrow Twisted Metal Small Brawl, and it turns out that it was just a demo disc that had Small Brawl trailer in it, so I never got to play the game in any official context outside of emulation, especially since Small Brawl is still not on the PSN store, so I don't have access to play the game on console. When I played the game initially, I did find it somewhat odd, and it took a while to get used to the gameplay, likely because you are controlling RC cars instead of actual vehicles. The Twisted Metal series typically feature arcade-style controls and handling, which feels somewhat incongruent with RC cars, since the very nature of RC cars is that they're meant to be kind of wobbly and loose, so to speak. Even after playing through the game in its entirety of all the vehicles, there's still one thing I can't get used to, and that's reversing. I thought that would impact my enjoyment of the game, but ultimately it's something I just put up with since the game was enjoyable otherwise. It's very much Twisted Metal at its core, this time intended for a younger audience, literally, since the cast are a bunch of kids and teens, and as mentioned, they're controlling RC cars. I'll eventually go out my way to buy a legitimate, though used, copy of Small Brawl from a Canadian game store many years later, even though I already had the ability to play the game for free. I had a bit of a clicker's itch lately and decided to get a bunch of physical copies of games regardless of being able to emulate them. I bought the used copy of Small Brawl for somewhere around $30, which only consisted of the game disc in good condition, which is swell considering how the only full-on physical copy I could find is a used copy apparently. That's $100+ here in New York. And no matter how much I like the Twisted Metal series, 100 plus for a used copy of an old PS1 Twisted Metal game is absolutely nuts. Anyway, while I played Small Brawl via emulator in the past, I think my enjoyment of the game was minimal, when the only character I played was Warthog, who is significantly weaker than the other versions of him. Imagine my surprise when I learned of the game development trivia, that Warthog's vehicle wasn't even his originally, and it belonged to Grasshopper, who was cut. While Warthog was supposed to get a more fitting military-type vehicle as is tradition for a soldier version of him. But as of all things, time is pesky, and the development team had hastily cut Grasshopper and repurposed the vehicle to be Warthog. Actually, playing as the other characters ended up making Small Brawl a far more enjoyable experience, as there were many strong vehicles that also had stats to help make handling the RC cars in this game more bearable, more stable, less wobbly. And I've got a couple of favorites in this game. It'll probably also help that I was doing these playthroughs with the 30 FPS Game Shark code and overclock turned on for a smoother experience, as vanilla Small Brawl does run at 20 FPS, which is the same as 1 and 2. So I was technically cheating in order to make the game enjoyable. Still, Small Brawl presented some really good takes on classic Twisted Metal vehicles, and if you're going by series release order, then it was basically a long time since we've seen the likes of some characters like Crimson Fury and Twister. My favorites in this game are Darkseid, Slam, and Shadow. All vehicles have powerful specials, and in the case of Slam and Shadow, great combo potential. Barring Spectre, who has the weakest special in the game, and Mime and Piecemeal, who act as Ditto fighters with their specials, it seems to me that nearly every vehicle has a special that seems to do about a quarter of the enemy health bar. But the vehicles still feel distinct enough despite this, which is more than what you could say for Head On, where every vehicle feels samey with very few standouts. And with Small Brawl, there's still other standouts like Outlaw, Thumper, and Twister. I did find the bosses as playable characters rather underwhelming. Chopper feels far weaker compared to the boss version, to the point that this is one of the few instances I'd rather play the boss version of a specific character, since a playable boss Chopper does far more damage with a special. Never mind the huge amount of HP he has. Piecemeal is cool conceptually, but even with him mainly using the strongest specials with his special randomizer, I think he'd be far better maybe using a amalgamated version of some specials in a similar vein to Twisted Metal 1 Minion to go with his character concept. There are also codes to play as the boss version of Piecemeal, but while the levels having few indoor areas, so to speak, makes him being large not much of an issue most of the time, he does have collision detection issues when it comes to picking up weapons. Anything that is not on a sloped surface or angled surface will slip through when you try to run through it and to pick it up. So I'm mixed on Piecemeal in general, be it playing as the regular or boss version. I do like that he's a new boss character and he provides the gameplay concept of a special randomizer, which remains unique to Small Brawl, with no other Twisted Metal game having a Ditto fighter, but that's about it. Just knowing the fact that Minion was originally planned to be the final boss in this game is somewhat depressing, as it would have been a cool callback to Twisted Metal 1 where he was the final boss, in addition to making it that Minion would have been in all Twisted Metal games at that point. Definitely a case of what could have been. I think that while the levels are not my favorite in the Twisted Metal series, they're definitely very creative and fitting for Small Brawl's world of RC car tournaments. The settings all make sense: a playground, a treehouse, a theater auditorium, a kitchen, and so on. My main complaint about them would be that they're all practically a bunch of squares. You can't have levels that are too big, and you also can't have levels with too many distinct elevations or areas. The gameplay in them, however, is great. We have several levels with unique hazards that wouldn't make sense in a regular Twisted Metal, like a skull that moves around in Carnival, the lawnmower on Treetop Rumble or Gridiron Gore, the spikes in Minigolf Minium, or the meat grinder and Meet Your Maker. Better yet, the environmental weapons are all unique in this game. There isn't a single environmental weapon that involves the use of lightning, for instance, and while Treetop Rumble does have its own environmental weapon, the aforementioned lawnmower is unique in that it activates by shooting a switch on it to turn it on, making for the one instance of an environmental weapon that does not involve picking up a weapon icon and using it, and also effectively giving two environmental weapons in a level. Environmental weapons are generally an afterthought since most levels don't have them. They're usually repetitive in appearance, like lightning being the most common environmental attack, or not useful to be worth using. Plus, a car combat game obviously being balanced around cars engaging each other with weapons that they fire at each other as opposed to having a level do all the work for you. But I think Small Brawl has the best implementation of environmental weapons, especially when compared to Black, which repeated the use of lightning and missile barrages for its environmental attacks, or Head-On, where environmental weapons were barely effective or useful compared to the infinitely more helpful regular weapons. This helps make the levels in the game stand out even more beyond their design concept of being levels suited to RC cars rather than regular vehicles. If I were to choose my favorite levels in this game, Playground Peril and Treetop Rumble are the two that stand out the most to me. Again, when compared to levels in other Twisted Metal games, they'd probably rank lower, but for Small Brawl and for RC car setting, I think these two are great. Plus, it also helps that Playground Peril has a theme that is a remix of Twisted Metal 2 Los Angeles, and Treetop Rumble has a theme that is a remix of Twisted Metal 2 Holland. And of course, anyone who's played Jet Moto will recognize that those soundtracks showed up in that game first before Twisted Metal 2. That makes these levels even more enjoyable to play in. Plus, Small Brawl would be the last Twisted Metal game to feature rooftop dips, making characters like Slam and Twister very deadly thanks to their specials being capable of chucking cars off the roofs. The level does feature a trampoline in the middle that allows you a safe area to fall, but the areas outside the trampoline at ground level are fair game. The other level I like is Meet Your Maker, primarily for the meat grinder and the environmental weapon being very deadly since it speeds up the conveyor belt and meat grinder, allowing for fast kills. The other levels are okay. If there's any level I'd rate low, it would probably be Gridiron Gore and Now Slaying. Twisted Metal 2 Holland is one of my favorite levels, despite most criticism directed towards it being a flat terrain and featureless. Gridiron Gore minus the football helmets and giant lawnmower is technically similar, but this map is also one good example this map is a good example of why a large map would not work in Small Brawl, at least not without a bunch of other things built into the level. There's just too much space with pickups all spread apart from each other, so you're running across the field to one end to get weapons, and then you're running across to the other end of the field to get the other weapons. Gridiron Gore having a remix of Twisted Metal 2 Moscow is neat, but this level really needed more weapon pickups or some other things to make use of the large space in it. Now Slaying is the final level of the game, and it's where you face Piecemeal, and while this is obviously a smaller level than Gridiron Gore, it also does not really have a lot of weapon pickups to work with either, which is really bad when the bosses in this game have too much health, and Piecemeal is technically an easy fight, but the mammoth HP, even on easy difficulty, ends up dragging things out. I'm grateful for Small Brawl greatly downplaying the puzzle boss aspect from Black, given that Small Brawl came out after Black, and Piecemeal is a very small puzzle type boss. But lack of weapon pickups and large HP on him makes me dislike Now Slaying. You will basically need to stock up at Treetop Rumble to make Now Slaying bearable. I think if Now Slaying only had 3 regular enemies to face, it would make the level drag out a little less, especially since Piecemeal is just a regular damage sponge boss, whose fight gimmick is only designed to drag things out in a way that isn't fun. So 2 favorite levels gets cancelled out by 2 disliked ones, perfectly balanced as all things should be. The weapons in this game are the classic Twisted Metal 2 ones with the addition of one new weapon, the Roman Candle. I like that Small Brawl decided to take a leaf out of Twisted Metal 3 and 4's playbook and made weapons have different ammo counts when you pick them up, instead of rigidly sticking to either 2 per pickup or 1 like the other non-989 TM games. Fire missiles give you 3 per pickup, for instance, and Roman candles give you the most at 10 per pickup. I don't really like Roman candles, even if they do fit a niche. Of being a quick spammable rapid-fire-esque weapon that doesn't exist with any other weapon, even among the special weapons, especially since skill weapons from Black aren't a thing in Small Brawl. But all the other weapons have their uses. After Black replaced napalms and remote bombs with the gas can, it was neat to have the original napalms and remote bombs. The napalms are very similar to 4's with shorter lobbing arcs, but the napalm will adjust its trajectory if the enemy is closer to you, making it so that they can't overshoot the enemy, which is very nice. Small Brawl will be the last game to feature the original napalms, with the napalms in the games afterward essentially being Black's gas cans. The remote bomb sometimes feels weaker than it should be, but it launches enemies high into the air. And like in 3, aerial cars cannot turbo or move in the air, so it makes for a nice combo setup even if the remote bomb doesn't do the damage I feel it should. Though all the Twisted Metal 2 weapons are in this game, I did find it a bit weird that the ricochets were Black's discs instead of the 2's bombs, considering the return of napalm and remote bombs. But that's just me nitpicking. While there are no skill weapons in this game, there are still randomizers to pick up which can give you a random weapon or turbo, which again is another aspect unique to Small Brawl. 2012 technically does have a weapon randomizer in the form of the Mercy bonus, but that's reliant on destroying the enemy vehicle first. I don't like turbos being reverted to partial pickups from 1 and 2 when they've been full refill in all the other TM games since then. Turbos drain too quickly for my liking, and they don't provide enough of a speed boost to make them feel useful. Not to mention how it absolutely bites on Gridiron Gore, where only 1 turbo pickup exists on that map, with the mystery pickup being the only other potential source of turbo. So if you run out of turbo, you will absolutely will, if you intend to cover any kind of distance on Gridiron Gore in a reasonable amount of time, you will feel the eternity when trying to run through the field into the corners of the map to scrounge for weapon pickups. At least it would have made more sense to have maps of little to no turbo pickups being a full refill. Not to mention, I still can sometimes confuse remote bombs or turbos at times, since they also use a red aura color code. I think maybe an orange color scheme would have made more sense and a quicker way to distinguish them from remote bombs. But on your weapon HUD, with the turbo and energy meters being next to each other, I guess red and blue probably go better with each other than blue and orange. I don't know how many people like machine guns overheating, but I am definitely in favor of them never overheating, with head-on being the sole exception. So I'm grateful to Small Brawl for not having overheating machine guns. Maybe it's placebo, but playing Small Brawl on a higher frame rate makes machine guns feel more devastating. A little closer to Black's machine guns that provide enough time for you to take advantage of them before overheating. And that's greatly appreciated in Twisted Metal game that takes after Twisted Metal 1 and 2, where you don't have a huge abundance of weapon pickups scattered throughout the map like Black, unfortunately making what weapon pickups that are available on the map in the areas they are located at more valuable. Also, while ramming wouldn't really come back in a big way until 2012, I do think the ram damage that does exist in Small Brawl is pretty good. Just enough to make a difference and make a dent in the enemy, but not being a weapon in the same way ramming is in 1 and 2. Energy moves are very similar to Black's in terms of listing as well as the command inputs, but because Small Brawl is geared towards a smaller audience, they offered more luxury in energy moves. Execution of them is relatively lenient enough, not as responsive as 3 or 4's, but far more so than 2, and this is considering how Small Brawl runs at 20 FPS just like 2. Freezes and shields drain less energy than usual, allowing you multiple uses of them. Freezes have a nice midway between 989 games freezes and Black's freezes. There's no cheap shot from Black, but a frozen enemy can't be refrozen. The freeze on a frozen enemy just won't do anything to them. Some weapons will break the ice on a frozen enemy instantly, but some others don't. Power missiles, for instance, will leave just a small bit of ice left on a frozen enemy, giving you a chance to hit them with another power missile, allowing you to deal some pretty good damage to them. You can break out of freezes so that you aren't a sitting duck, but the freeze state is just disadvantageous enough to let enemies do their follow-up attacks on you. I don't like vehicles still jumping in a frozen state like in Black, but that does end up being crucial for someone like Dumper to be able to deal devastating damage with a special. I like shields being a dome again in Small Brawl, especially given how its shields in the other Twisted Metal games would be an energy-based shield rather than a dome. Don't like the more clear, transparent look, though I imagine they did that because solid colors on a dome would probably end up covering the vehicle and obscuring it from view. I'd have preferred rear fire to have been the left, right, down input for old time's sake without including the fire weapon input as part of the command, especially since again the execution of energy moves is lenient enough but still might be iffy given that Small Brawl runs at 20 FPS. Would it have been cool to include some kind of big whammy secret energy move like Minion Special? Honestly, not really a big deal. Having freezes and shields cost less to use compared to the other Twisted Metal games is already a huge boon. I love that Small Brawl kept the unlock system similar to Black's, but did it in a better way. All unlockable characters and levels take some time, but the methods range from careful exploration and interaction to beating the game in certain ways, and playing endurance mode for all the unlockable levels. At least all the unlockable levels are completely new, and you are not unlocking a level that should already be accessible in a single player environment by default like skyscrapers. Also, there's no arbitrary restriction of unlockable levels that are only specifically playable in a multiplayer setting. To this day, I'm still driven nuts by the fact that Power Plant in Black is a level that makes perfect sense to be playable in a single player setting, given its size and general openness, but they locked it to being multiplayer only. In Small Brawl, there are 3 unlockable levels, and they don't deviate from the conceptual design of the other levels, which means they're perfectly playable in both single player and multiplayer. Plus, like in 4, all the characters that show up are playable with 0 restrictions, making this one of the few Twisted Metal games where you don't have any characters inaccessible to a player. The unlockable vehicles only have operator bios and no endings or an actual face behind them, but that's about the only downside to them. 5 unlockable vehicles and 3 unlockable levels is just enough of a content grind to keep you playing, minus going for all the character endings in the game. I certainly prefer this to Twisted Metal 4 having you get every level and character in the game just by playing through and beating the game once, and that was the first Twisted Metal to feature substantial unlockables. If there's anything I would have liked to have in Small Brawl, it probably would be the ability to switch weapons and being able to combo them while using a special with a long duration like Slam or Twister. I feel like this ability is emblematic of the PS1 era Twisted Metals, the ability to synergize pickup weapons with specials. Post PS1 Twisted Metals have shied away from this and made special weapons one-off independent weapons where the majority of the special damage is meant to be done to the special itself to justify not being able to switch to another weapon during them. Twisted Metal Black Warthog is the one lone exception to this, as he's able to switch to another weapon while his special is active. Even then, the online version of Black Warthog, as well as his lost version, get rid of this ability, making it clear that the development team see this as an oversight rather than a neat feature. That Small Brawl does not do this is a bummer, given how returned to its roots it is compared to Black, when it started out as the next Twisted Metal game after that one, with only 3 of its vehicles being new, with the rest being all returning faces, the weapon list being from 2 with a few exceptions, and the use of remixes of certain Twisted Metal 1 and 2 songs for level music. Having the ability to switch to other weapons and use them while a long duration special is going off would have been wonderful and solidified Small Brawl as a truly classic PS1 era Twisted Metal, despite the change in universe and card combat scenario. In any case, Small Brawl is a strong 8 out of 10, and I will confidently place it as my third favorite of the Twisted Metal series. Next up is Twisted Metal Black, and while I've already done a full playthrough of that game with every character on hard mode, I'm going to spice it up with some stuff to make the playthroughs of the game feel fresh again. We'll see you there next time. This is Insanity, hope you enjoyed the gameplay and commentary, and I'm out.